Malik Monk is back with the Kings for another season, and I am so happy that I went out and bought this Malik Monk jersey because Monk just brings the fun to this Kings team, and that matters because especially in, the age of social media, everyone is always criticizing and not very happy unless you win the championship. But a guy like Malik Monk brings the joy in watching Kings basketball, even if they aren't a championship level team. And I've been watching these TikTok edits of teams from all different sports, teams in the past where their fans will make edits, and a lot of these teams they didn't win championships, but they're still like remembering back to these old teams that were very fun and these old players. And it's like it didn't matter that they didn't win a championship because they just had a connection to that player and miss watching that team. And so that's why I'm so happy that Malik Monk stayed, because it's players like Malik Monk that I just love watching no matter whether we win or lose. And so it is time to do the Malik Monk player preview for this upcoming season. But before I get into that, make sure if you enjoy this content to subscribe or at least leave a like. And if you really enjoy this content, you can become a member where you will be shouted out in every video. And very soon, maybe by the time that this gets posted, there will be new custom badges for members. Thank you to Cody Willis for being a member and supporting the channel. And so let's get right into this Malik Monk player preview. When Malik Monk first joined the Kings, he came in and he was just like a guy off the bench that was a little inconsistent, still played very well, gave a great offensive boost, but he couldn't find that consistency. And then last season, I feel like he really settled into his role and was actually given an even bigger role with the struggles of Harrison Barnes and Kevin Huerter. So he was given more of a role, especially as a ball handler, and he really thrived in that role. And so I think it'll be interesting to see if he can kind of maintain that level with DeMar DeRozan coming in and taking some of those touches away, taking some of those ball handling opportunities away, because in many situations, Malik Monk was the primary ball handler, even when he was on the court at the same time as De'Aaron Fox or Domantas Sabonis. And now I definitely don't expect that to entirely go away, but I just think those touches will go down. But hopefully what that will do is allow him to thrive a little more without the ball in his hands, and so have his efficiency go up, especially from three, because last season he shot 35% from three on about 6 attempts per game, and I think he's just a better shooter than that. And I think there just weren't many opportunities where players were creating shots for him. And so I hope that with the introduction of a great passer, just like himself and DeMar DeRozan, hopefully they'll be able to help each other out, and especially DeMar helping Malik Monk get more open shots or slashing opportunities, because I think that's one part of Monk's game that I think has the possibility of being really good, that off the catch, either catch and shoot or attacking closeouts. I think he can be very good at that because he's a very good slasher, a very good finisher as well with his athleticism. And so I think that's kind of a part of his game that hasn't really been unlocked yet. And so hopefully playing with a guy like DeRozan can possibly do that, because we know what he can do like in the pick and roll with Sabonis, but now it's a little different when you're just catching it at the 3-point line with the defender closing out hard on you. It opens up different opportunities, and so we might be able to see a little bit more of that. The Kings offense last season was just so centered around the 3-point line. Mike Brown, he preached, driving kicks, constantly wanted spray threes, but it was always Monk being the one to drive and spray the ball out for those threes. He was never really on the receiving end of that. But I think another thing that's going to be interesting is I don't think Malik Monk is going to start this season. I think some people, when they first saw he signed, maybe thought like, oh, did he get promised a starting role? I don't think he did. I think it still makes more sense for him to come off the bench and have a guy like Keon Ellis or even Kevin Huerter be the starter. But I'll get to those two in later videos. But I just think it still makes more sense for Malik Monk to come off the bench just because it's easier to stagger minutes that way. But last season, he was so important to the Kings offense, like I said, as that ball handler. Yet he still didn't play as many minutes as I thought he should have. He played 26 minutes a game, and I definitely thought he should have played more. I thought that he was important enough, especially in the clutch, where no matter how he was playing the rest of the game, he should have been in the fourth quarter, right? You have Fox and you have Sabonis. Those are two guys that no matter what kind of games they were having, no matter how poorly they were playing, they were always going to be in the game in the clutch. It didn't matter if Fox was 1 for 12 from the field. He's going to be in there. Same for Sabonis. And I thought it should have been the same for Monk last season, but it really wasn't. I remember specifically a game, I believe it was against Orlando, where he was having a really poor game and they didn't have him in, and it forced Fox to just be the only guy that was really handling the ball. And Fox, like, I think he turned the ball over multiple times, and we got bailed out and we barely snuck out of there with the win, I think. But it just makes me think, like, if he wasn't even like a lock to be in the lineup in clutch time last season, then he definitely will not be this season. Because you have like a lineup of Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Keegan, and Sabonis, and that's a great offensive lineup, and I think it creates a lot of opportunities for Monk to score in different ways, and really just I think that lineup is very versatile offensively, not just relying on the three-pointer, but being able to score in many different ways. But then obviously you question the defense, and that's where if Monk isn't having a good game, or maybe even if he is having a good game, he still might not be in the game in clutch time because you add a guy like DeRozan, and I think he's going to easily slot in to a role where you're never going to bench him down the stretch. He just might be sacrificed for a more defensive player down the stretch of games. And now he's really going to have to earn his spot in closing lineups. But if the defense with a lineup of, like I said, Fox, Monk, DeRozan, Keegan, and Sabonis, if it's doing fine, if there are no glaring, matchup problems, putting that lineup out there is still extremely dangerous offensively, where you can sacrifice a little defense, especially since the Kings' clutch time offense last year was not very good. And so I can just imagine a scenario where you have like De'Aaron Fox with the ball, with DeMar DeRozan setting a screen for him on one side of the court, and them, running a little two-man game, and they attract the defense, and then they swing it over to Monk, who gets a Sabonis seal inside as he drives to the basket and lays it up. Like, I can imagine that scenario. And then you have like Keegan sitting in the corner. If you want to help off him, you can do that, and he'll just knock down the three. So that offensive lineup sounds amazing. But at the end of the day, Monk is a smaller guard in a team that lacks wing defense. And so he needs to step up on the defensive end if he wants to stay on the court in those important situations. Because last season, I don't think he was terrible defensively, but he definitely isn't a great defender. You can see his athleticism shine through at times, going for a crazy block, but then at other times, he can gamble for a steal, or he can just get beat off the dribble and they can expose his size. And so I think he just needs to be very, very locked in defensively, doing the best he can. And even if he is doing his best defensively and performing at his very best, it still might not be enough to keep him on the court in certain situations, just because you have more talented and better physically defenders instead of him. But really, these are good problems to have. I think Monk will act very much as a sixth man this year rather than a starter coming off the bench, if that makes sense. It's kind of like what I was referring to earlier, where I thought he should have last year been a guy that was just no matter what in the closing lineup, which he was most of the time, but there were just times he wasn't. Whereas this season, he's very much more like he is a bench player, and we're just very happy to have a bench player that is as talented as him, I think. He's not going to get, 30 plus minutes in most games, I would imagine, if he wasn't even getting that last season. It'll just be interesting to see how his minutes are managed, because if it was a talking point last season, which it was like he can never play over 30 minutes. It was kind of an ongoing theme. Then what are his minutes gonna look like this season? And I think they'll probably stay around the same, just because Harrison Barnes was already playing a good amount of minutes, and DeRozan will just take those, and then Malik's minutes probably won't be impacted that much. But I just think if you didn't bring in a guy like DeRozan, Malik was going to see an increase in minutes this season, and I don't think he'll see that anymore. But really the reason that he's still going to be a very important player for this team is because, yes, he is a six man that's a small guard and can score, but he isn't that stereotypical like scoring six man that you think about where it's just all scoring and nothing else. He evolved past that into a more complete offensive player. He became a pass first guard in these past 2 seasons. He evolved from his time in Charlotte, where he was more of that just score first guard, into a pass first guard that has one of the highest assist percentages on drives. He's so great operating the pick and roll with Sabonis. And that's really why he got the contract that he did, is because he added that playmaking element to his game, because there are a million like 6'2", 6'3" guards that can score and play subpar defense. Just a million of them. Maybe not quite with Malik's athletic tools, but still you can find guys that are going to give you 15 points per game off the bench at the guard position pretty easily. And so the way that he separated himself was from being such a great passer. And so that's what's going to help him still get a lot of minutes, because I think he is more of a backup point guard than a backup shooting guard, like a lot of people label him. So he's still going to get plenty of burn and be very important to this team's offense this season, because yes, DeRozan is a good playmaker, but he still isn't a point guard. So Malik still is probably the best playmaker and just ball handler outside of Sabonis on this team, even better than Fox and DeRozan. And so he's still going to be very important, even if he doesn't see that increase in minutes that he probably wants. But it is pretty crazy that the Kings got him on the contract that they got him on. Like, there's a reason Sabonis was surprised that he re-signed. Going into the offseason, I think I was relatively confident, like maybe 65% sure that he was going to come back. And then throughout the offseason, I feel like it got less and less and less. And I do think we do this thing where we kind of overrate our own players and the contracts that they're going to get. And maybe at times Kings players get a little underrated. And so both of those things kind of helped out when thinking about the type of offers that Monk was going to get outside of the Kings. But really, when you compare Monk's deal to some of the other deals around the league, like especially you look at Emmanuel Quickley's massive deal that he got, that's like 2 times what Monk got. And they're not that different of players. And they're like 1 year apart in age, I think. Quickley, a better defender, but still, like, they're very similar players. And, the Raptors are banking on Quickley evolving into this like number 1 guard, I guess, and they're going to give him the opportunity to do so, whereas Malik's not really going to get that opportunity on the Kings. But still, I think there's the world where Quickley doesn't really develop much past where he is now, and you're just looking at these 2 deals being like, how did Emmanuel Quickley get like double the money that Malik Monk did? I don't think it'll make much sense. And so I'm very thankful that Malik Monk is back. I think when you're looking at Monk's numbers, last season, 15.5 points per game, 5 assists, you might see those numbers take a hit a little bit, maybe back to where they were his first season with the Kings. But I think that will hopefully also coincide with a rise in efficiency from, 44% from the field, 35% from three, up a little bit, because the Kings are definitely going to need him to be a shooter, and I think he's going to need to be more of a catch and shoot shooter this season than he was in seasons past. And the Kings just have so many offensive weapons now that there are going to be times where a couple guys are having off nights and then other guys can step up. And so Malik's still going to have plenty of opportunity, but there is a small part of me that kind of fears his role could be diminished, and maybe because of that he's not playing as well, and then maybe he gets a little unhappy, and then maybe he becomes a little expendable because of the guards that the Kings have and the situation they're in. And so maybe instead of, everyone thinks it's Kevin Huerter that's going to be traded, maybe it becomes Malik Monk that could possibly be on the trading block. And I really don't want that to happen. But I just think there is a slight possibility that we could be talking about that at the midpoint of this season, and I really hope we're not. But I just think sometimes you have to make the not so popular move. I feel like you see that all the time where you have to trade a guy who's really good and is loved by the fans just because you need help at a different position. And so that could be the case at some point. And I think if there were any trade where you kind of have to do what the Celtics did, trade Marcus Smart, who had been such an important player and was kind of the heart and soul of the team and the fans loved him, but you trade him because you need a different type of player or player at a different position. I just could see that being a possibility at some point in the future here. Hopefully not, because I just got this Malik Monk jersey, so I don't want that to be the case. And I think if the Kings can make a move with a Kevin Huerter in draft capital to get a guy that can slot into the starting lineup, and then you have Fox, DeRozan, Keegan, Sabonis, and then that fifth starter that you trade for, and then Monk off the bench, that is the perfect scenario. But it's just not guaranteed that a deal like that could be worked out. And like I said, you have to give up talent to get talent. And so for that reason, I'm definitely not going to take watching Malik Monk for granted, especially when last season he gets injured, misses the last 10 games of the season. And those could have, that could have been the last time we ever saw Malik in a Kings uniform. And thankfully it wasn't. But, I don't want to take the really fun players like Malik Monk for granted. So anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roller Report in this player preview. Let me know who you want to see me do next. Maybe a Kevin Huerter, maybe a Keon Ellis or someone else. And I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.